Hi, everyone. Pastor Galen, lead pastor at Cheyenne Hills Church. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope that these podcasts will be a real encouragement to you on your spiritual journey. You can also connect with Cheyenne Hills at CheyenneHills.org. Hope you enjoy the program.
Across the street and around the world, Cheyenne Hills.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Nathan, we're just going to continue to roll on today because, heck, it's snowing outside.
Yeah, it can't go anywhere anyway.
We can't go.
We can just talk all day.
We may just do podcasts here, just like one right after another.
Turn them live. I like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I maybe to turn just a little bit to more of the political bent. You've got some things that we were talking about in the break that I don't know. Let's start with Canada. There's some stuff going on in Canada that's like that's hard for me to take a lot of this.
Well, so if I could let me frame it, if it's all right,
Sure.
with something that was very intriguing and actually leads toward this whole discussion of Canada and England and different places. 20 years ago, I don't know if you ever got involved in it. I didn't. I was in college age around that time, but 20 years ago is the anniversary of the release of the very first Harry Potter movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's the book. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. It came out when my daughter was in high school. That's what
Okay.
I remember. So that would she's probably 20 years ago. It probably was movie.
Okay.
She was anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But so you think about it. So 20 years ago,
Wow.
J.K. Rowling wrote these books, and she, of course, has become a billionaire because it's one of the biggest selling series of books and movies of all time. You can still go all these years later and go to a local bookstore, a prominent one we have here in Cheyenne, and you can find tons of little magic wands and everything else.
No kidding.
20 years later.
Yeah.
And so this reunion, though, what they were going to do to celebrate 20 years, they were going to get everybody together.
Okay.
And they invited all the big actors and actresses. And the one person they didn't invite was the author herself, J.K. Rowling.
Because
J.K. Rowling, over the last year or so, she's considered very much a almost radical feminist.
Okay.
But she's been very clear that what's happening right now in the transgender movement is beginning to actually take hard-fought rights away from ladies. Yeah. And she's been clear about like a weightlifter that comes along that was a boy and then declares himself a girl. Or just recently at the University of Pennsylvania, where this swimmer who swam for 3 years on the men's team switches over and swims on the women's team. And he was just fair to middling on the men's team, but now he's just skunking every record out there. Yeah. And she's just pointing out that's wrong. Yeah. Here's the thing. When she first began writing 20 years ago, if someone were to say something like transgender, that would have been a concept that wouldn't have even made sense at the time. Mm-hmm. That's how much the world has changed since the Harry Potter books first came out.
Interesting. So, and she's come out publicly then against transgender, the movement in general. And so they said, okay, because you did that, we're not. Is that right?
Well, they've even invented a new word called the trans exclusionary radical feminist. They call them TERFs. It's a way of trying to make people sound really, really bad. Yeah. And trans exclusionary radical feminist.
Okay.
And they have said that of a number of people. I remember a tennis star, Martina Navratilova. She is a lesbian.
Okay.
And she began to complain when men were trying to compete as women in sports. She said, there's a reason why there are two different categories here. And people begin to call her a TERF. Now, she is a very, very famous sports person.
Sure, right.
And so she's just pointing out what everybody can see.
Right.
But that's how much the world's changed.
Well, and that's you push an idea or push its logic to an ultimate conclusion. And it's like that's what's happening in transgender, especially in the athletic realm.
Right.
People are saying it's like, okay, this isn't right. That you think of a woman that's accelerated in whatever, swimming, track, you name it, and then have a man come over and say, I'm identifying or I'm transitioning into being a woman.
Right.
And I can see that the whole thing kind of collapses on itself.
Well, and that actually brings us to a couple other things on this subject that have happened just within the last few weeks. that are coming out. There has been now a new effort with a group. It looks like, according to the American Civil Liberties Union and different groups, that they have been, there's been a new movement to try to weave together three things: race, gender, and class in the race, gender, class narrative. Now, here's what's happening. They're recognizing that people can clearly see boys and girls are different. And it's very visible in sports. So now they're trying to come up with a winning narrative to try to push back against what everybody can see. So the only way they can do that is actually to try to combine different things that are not necessarily related to one another and try to combine it into a whole to push an agenda. And that's this narrative that they're trying to do, and it's trying to talk about marginalized people. You know, by the way, this is right out of the Marxist playbook. But this came out, this was yesterday. Wow. When this came out. And so they came out with the architecture of a race, class, gender narrative and named the villains who violate our values. That's actually how they're viewing Christians. They view us as villains who violate their values, expose their motivation to get back into or holding on to power. They just believe it's a power narrative. That, again, is another Marxist thing. What we're talking about is we actually do care about our young girls and their sports and don't want boys to be driving them out of the opportunities that were fought for under Title IX.
Yeah, for sure. That's true.
But this is where it becomes very real for the church.
Wow.
In Canada, they have a big conversation. It's actually a big piece of legislation. And it's a bill that would ban conversion therapy. Now, let me explain what that is. People will, and this is the way a lot of times people on the left will operate. They will talk about like social emotional learning.
Yep.
That basically, well, children can't learn math if their stomachs are empty.
Right.
Well, I would agree with that too.
Yep.
But what they actually mean though is the top end of Maslow's hierarchy, where you're moving them toward a radical left idea of self-actualization. So they'll say one thing everybody can agree on, but what they mean in their minds is something totally different.
Gotcha.
So when we talk about conversion therapy, I know of a person here in the state of Wyoming that will talk about shock therapy or dumping cold ice on people and stuff like that, and like radical ideas that doesn't even make sense. To try to shock people away from their same-sex attraction or something.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So they're saying that is what they want to ban. But what this is doing, though, is even talking about if you have a conversation, if someone comes to you as a pastor and says, I'm struggling, how do I handle this? And you try to just speak to them in kindly, in love. And first of all, have them talk it out and then give them guidance along the way. Here's what the Bible says. Right. That is banned in this legislation in Canada.
It actually spells that out.
It spells it out. It even goes further to where some are wondering if this would address the pastor in the pulpit.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge threat to religious liberty. And part of the challenge is there are people that are confused, that are struggling with these issues. And the church is, the genuine church, reaches out in love and tries to walk them through this. Right. But we're talking about what they're talking about, conversion therapy. We're talking about what naturally is called just talk therapy. Yeah. Sitting down across from someone and talk.
Well, in going through, there's an illustration I thought we brought up a little bit earlier, just about, let's say, an eating disorder of some kind.
Yeah, right.
And to say that, you're going to speak truth, you're going to speak it in love, and you're going to try to get that person some help because they're in a place where they can't see clearly either their body image or think properly about food. Whatever it is, one of those things they're dealing with. And so to say that we couldn't help them, I mean, of course we have to be able to help them. And sometimes people just can't see things. And I think that's I think it's similar to what's happening in sexuality. Right. They're just in a place of, it's confusion. It's a place they just are stuck for whatever reasons.
Right, right.
And then you're saying that if you were in Canada, let's say I was a pastor in Canada and I did my very best to speak truth in love, then what is there consequences built into this?
Absolutely.
What is it?
It's fines and different things. But part of it, whenever you look at that, your only options are either to affirm their
because it's banning.
Broken,
they're banning this talk therapy, if you want to call it that.
Exactly. So you can either affirm what they're saying, or you just can't say anything at all.
Wow.
And here's the question. Here's what we do
but
have
you
to
would think in a church, people are coming to this pastor, and he can't speak the truth in love in Canada.
Exactly.
Wow.
That's the great threat here. Wow. And there are people that are concerned, but what breaks my heart is when it comes to just the average person who has gone through their school system there and all those things, basically they don't even think about it. They don't understand the value of religious liberty. Mm-hmm. And that's something I think that we have to get good at in the church, is talking about the value of religious freedom. Today, when you say religious liberty, I saw this on a bumper sticker a while back. It said religious liberty, and it had the equals sign, and it says hate.
Yeah, right.
And when nothing could be further from the truth. That when we talk about religious freedom, we're talking about your ability to speak your mind, to speak truth in love. But that actually begs the question, if you cannot speak truth, if you can't speak what's on your mind, do you actually have freedom?
Yeah.
Because that's the root of all freedoms.
Which, that our First Amendment right is that's what supposedly protects us in America, right? From this kind of thing happening. So my question is, are there things that, do you see encroaching on our First Amendment rights here in the States?
Yes, sir.
What do you see?
There has been. There was an effort. Thankfully, it failed to come out of committee this year, but in Wyoming, there was a bill. It was called a bias crimes bill. Now, everywhere else it's just called hate crimes. They know that hate crimes, everybody can see that as being really bad. Oh, that's scary. But what they did is they changed it. They called it bias crimes bill. A bias crimes bill. And then what it does is it basically made it a hate crime to do certain things. And a lot of what they're talking about are things that it gives an added penalty if you can prove it's a hate crime. Now, first of all, Pace Law Review Journal proved that that's almost impossible to prove, number one.
Okay, good.
But then number two, all it does then is says that the government is going to put certain crimes on a different status than every other crime. Okay. Whereas what we're talking about, a hate crime would be any crime you commit against another person. That is very hateful. That's wrong. What we believe in is equality before the law. And what that does is moves the law, it weighs the law heavily toward certain ideologies that have become very popular just over the last 5 years. And they're trying to tilt the law in their direction. And what happens is it tilts the law away from Christianity and liberty.
Yeah, I think we've felt it. It's kind of coming. It's like sometimes it kind of feels like it's right on the doorstep of, that we're going to be, I don't know, we can't speak truth or can't speak. Every time we have a day honoring veterans or any kind of day that's a Veterans Day or anything like that. We always make a big deal because the people that fought for this country, they fought for that Constitution, they fought for that amendment.
Right.
And the reason I can, and I always say this, it's like, listen, the reason I can speak freely, no king, nobody is telling me what I can or can't say from the pulpit. And we need to celebrate that.
Right.
And will that be that way forever? I hope so. But I always feel the threat of people that want to take that away. I know there's some that would love to take that away. But I think as long as we have breath, I think that's what we're supposed to be speaking God's truth, not my truth, not everybody, whatever's truth, God's truth, and speaking it in love and saying, okay, this is a standard. Right. And, the desire, listen, we're all fallen, broken people. We don't hit the standard perfectly. None of us do, but there's a standard. And I think it's amazing. They want pastors to remove the standard. Right. It's like, well, that's above my pay grade. I can't do that. Right. I guess that if they fine you, they will coerce you to
at least be quiet or
be
something.
Quiet about it. Yeah.
But I think this is the wonderful benefit of being a Christian. When you look at the way the radical left is pushing this ideology, it's almost like the Jacobins in the French Revolution. They do away with the aristocracy, then they do away with the king, and then eventually they do away with each other. They constantly are looking to battle. And pretty soon you have what was at one point the forefront of the left now is being attacked by a more radical version of it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that as a Christian we find ourselves, a position we find ourselves in that's beautiful, that is that by standing for an eternal truth, we find ourselves exactly where Augustine and Polycarp and other great men of the faith after the New Testament was written, who simply stood for truth, regardless of the personal consequence. And some of them died for it.
That's right.
And as a result of that, though, when we look backwards, we break the narrative that the radical left tries to push. They would try to say that we're on the wrong side of history, that they're on the right side of history. But if you look at actual history, the people who stood for truth, regardless of the personal consequence, when history actually is written, they're the ones on the right side of it.
Wow.
And so it doesn't mean it's easy. It just means that we are in a place of strength, eternal strength.
Well, it's truth. I mean, it's God, whatever true truth is God's truth. And when we speak that truth, now it may not be popular in a season or in a generation or who knows, I don't know. It makes you wonder sometimes how these things come back, but it always does. It always finds a way to people, I think, finally feel the consequences of lies, or having man operate out of his own truth.
Right.
When it's like it said it in Noah's day, I think they said it in different days throughout Israel's history, is that every man did what he thought was right in his own eyes.
Book of Judges. Yes, absolutely.
The Judges, and then, Noah, that was in his day, and things crater. And then God raises up a new leader and then, somebody or spokesman or something. Right. And so, this is it's an amazing thing that I never thought about, how that those guys were in the same place in a sense is probably the guys are in Canada. Somebody's going to have to speak up and maybe suffer some major consequences.
And these are issues right out of our headlines.
Wow, right now.
Right out of our headlines. And here's the great thing about the year 2022. We already saw in the year 2021. As people begin to push this radical agenda, more and more people are becoming aware that they're under assault.
Yep.
And sometimes people don't know they're in a struggle until they get hit in the face.
Yeah.
But after they get hit in the face, they realize, oh, this is serious.
This is serious, right?
And we've watched that with like critical race theory, or the question of systemic racism in the social emotional learning spectrum. That these ideologies are things that they might sound a certain way at first blush, but they actually mean something that's very, very dangerous, the whole concept of liberty and freedom. And I believe in 2022, what we're going to watch is people begin to push back against this radical leftist ideology and stand for eternal truth. And so I think it's going to be a good year.
You're very optimistic. That's good.
Yeah. Well,
I'm glad you are.
Yeah.
Okay, let me add to this optimism. I had a phone call just the other day of a gal that listened to, you remember when we had the interview with the administrator, and she said she'd heard that, and she was new to the area and had moved actually from another state, and she got here and she thought, this was this wonderful land of Wyoming, and found out that her kids had started practicing some things that were actually from another religion, and she goes, wow. Where did you get this? And the kids were young, and well, anyway, she was telling me about all these things, and she said, I am so thankful for that interview that you had to help me understand some of the things that are going on in our schools, and knows where to push. To your point, how to lovingly and gently but I don't know, as a parent, stand up for your kids. And so anyway, it's like, well, it's a bummer that kind of has to happen in our state, but it's kind of where we're living. Yeah. Okay, so I'm glad you're seeing some optimism, because I sometimes as pastors, I think we're a little bit like the police department. The police department has to deal with the most difficult situations in a community. Right. Yeah. And after a while, they get to thinking that everybody's a difficult situation. I mean, it's a psychological thing that these guys have to deal with, guys and gals. Well, as pastors have a little bit of that too. We hear. Yeah. I heard some stories even yesterday. It was like, oh my gosh, just sad, hard, difficult, struggle, and all that stuff. And so to hear some optimism too is important. We need to do that. I get it in Scripture, but to say, yeah, I think I see something coming down the pike that's good. So I'd like to hear about the good. And you were talking about there's like 5 different elected officials that are going to be elected this next year. That's a big thing too.
Oh yeah, Wyoming
talk about
has
that a little
big
bit.
election year.
Yeah.
So all 5 statewide, that is the constitutional positions, are up for re-election this year. I haven't heard of any opposition to any one of them just yet. Undoubtedly, there might be. But then secondly, in that Wyoming House of Representatives, of course, all 60 are up for re-election.
Okay.
And then in the Senate, 15 of the 30 are up for re-election.
No, that's a lot.
And so, yeah. And also, I know of a number of individuals who are not going to run again, or different things like that. So there's a lot of
change.
A lot of change.
Lots of things happening.
And of course, with change, the opportunity for change can come good opportunities and also bad ones.
Our governor help me out. Is that 4-year?
Yes, right.
4-year commitment.
All 5 of these statewide positions
are 4-year terms. Okay. And so, and as far as you know, there's nobody running against Governor Gordon right now.
Not that I've heard of. There is one guy who is a perennial candidate who's run a number of times, but I don't think that's, of course, going to go.
Well, and I've had an opportunity to talk to him on a couple of occasions, and every time I've seen him, I've just thanked him for. I think he's doing for the things that about masking or about keeping our doors open as a church. He's been solid gold as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's had a lot of pressure to close things down, and he's had a lot of, I know CDC and a lot of them they have their things they need to say, and he's got to sort all this out.
Well, there's no doubt that the last, especially 2 years, but the last 4 years, 3 years have been some of the most difficult that these United States have faced.
For sure.
Especially with the way some of the mandates came down from the federal government.
Yep.
These have been very, very difficult times. I think if you were to look backwards, you would have to look back to maybe either a war period or the Great Depression or something like that to find a time that has been more difficult than what we're facing. Yeah. And so I think what we've watched is, and obviously I've never agreed with any one person all the time. Mm-hmm. I don't even agree with myself all the time.
I was going to say, you probably have these arguments in your head.
But part of the narrative is if I were in that situation, how would I do? And I've really appreciated a number of the decisions that have been made, and also have tried to reach in where the decisions haven't been quite right and just be a friend. Yeah. But I think that actually this is the wonderful thing about being in Wyoming too, is that we actually can reach out and talk.
Yeah. There's access there.
There is.
He's made that, he's open, and you've been a big part of that, opening that access for pastors. But I feel like we've had a voice, and I know we have. I really appreciate it.
If I could reach out and just give a shout out to one, Ed Buchanan, our Secretary of State, is just stellar in every way possible. The way he's conducted these last 4 years, and also tried to keep business open and still try to figure out how to navigate this uncharted territory.
Yeah, that's true.
But he's done a tremendous job.
I agree. And there's a lot of commerce coming into our city here in Cheyenne and interstate. I know just statewide. I know there's just a lot of things happening. So
another one, our superintendent of public instruction has fought really hard against the ideology of critical race theory, and she's being very thoughtful in the way that she says things. But I think it's important when we can to say, listen, these are tough things, but we have to take a stand. And I appreciate people who can, when things get tough, are willing to lead. Yeah. And so,
well, I've enjoyed your voice in some of these issues. I know you've helped me a lot. I know you've helped a lot of people, and so I want to pass along kudos from people that I hear from. And so I appreciate you coming in on this snowy, wintry January day. And man, we're gonna have to.
It's getting.
If we get out of here, we're gonna. Yeah. It's gonna be.
It's getting, as they say, western out there.
It's getting a little western. People are picking their kids up from school here, and they're gonna be hopefully traveling safe. So, but anyway, as we want to end this program like we've ended all programs, I think it's imperative that we are strong and very courageous. God bless you all.